Michelle Ray Winkle Vasalinda. She is a four-term representative from Tallahassee, and we're super happy to have her here today.
Well, I am super happy to be here today. Not only is it wonderful to look out at this crowd and to know how hard you worked and the wisdom that you brought forward to our Constitution and to the state of Florida, but look at these beautiful steps. I mean, look how beautiful they are. What a great job. So in any event, what we need to make sure that we do is make sure that Amendment 1, that all the work that you did does not go to waste. We need to make sure that all right, I'll stop there for an applause.
Yeah.
We need to make sure that all the work that you did for Amendment 1 does not go to waste. And I think, sometimes I say, water's fundamental, and I think to myself, my goodness gracious, that is so obvious, but we don't act like it's obvious. And so Amendment 1 puts our money basically where our mouth is, where we ought to be, where our wisdom is, and to make sure that we have the money available to protect our springs and our aquifers. Fundamental things that must be protected so that Floridians have water to drink and water to play in and water to work with and to make sure that our economy stays strong. I was at an event last week and I mentioned Sao Paulo, Brazil. Everybody understands what's going on in Sao Paulo, Brazil, the fifth or seventh, or whatever the number is, largest industrialized city in the world. They are really, really suffering right now, suffering because of water shortages. And that could be us. I mean, Brazil is certainly not a desert. Sao Paulo is certainly not in a desert. But they did things that were not smart. And so we have compassion for them, we have sympathy for them, but we look at them as a cautionary tale. Florida, those kinds of things could happen in Florida. And I think most people look at Florida and say, oh, it's wet and it's got great water all over the place, and they don't understand. But you understand, and Floridians understood and had the wisdom to do what they did in putting Amendment 1 into the Constitution. So we are very pleased, but the work is not done. That's the important part. The work is not done. Pushing forward to make sure that money is spent wisely, that money is spent on fundamental things that wouldn't ordinarily have been done, and that we make sure that the message gets out to all Floridians that this is not the end-all be-all, this is not the ending solution, that each Floridian has to take personal responsibility for their water usage, conservation, efficiency, and to move forward with making sure we're doing other things to protect the aquifers and springs of Florida. And that means no fracking, that means a lot of other kinds of things that we need to make sure is in policy, that water is as front and center in everything we do in the state of Florida. So thank you, Aliki. Thank you, everyone who did the work with Amendment 1. And thanks to all Floridians who voted for Amendment 1 and let their wisdom be heard. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was wonderful. Very pleased to bring our next speaker up to the stage. He is my mentor, one of my good friends. He's the former Chief Environmental Advisor to 5 Florida governors, and he is the coordinator of the Florida Conservation Coalition, which is an environmental group started in 2012 by Senator Bob Graham after the 2011 session, and they really work to do their best to protect the lands and waters of Florida and look to coordinate environmental action. So please welcome to the stage Estes Whitfield.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you for being here. It's very impressive to see so many people from all over the state come to Tallahassee on this nice day for a magnificent cause. You couldn't have come at a better time or more important time, because our water and land is on the line. There are powerful forces that want to use this money and divert this money for purposes which are not intended in the Constitution or intended by you. The deciders on how Amendment 1 funds are spent, they reside in these 3 buildings right behind us. They're there now discussing it. Some of the best of them are here with us today.
Yeah.
This is going to be a major challenge. Believe me, it's going to be a major challenge. And let me give you a little historical perspective. Florida has a very spotted environmental history. Long before statehood, Florida's land and water was being exploited unrelentingly, treated as a commodity, polluted, drained, dredged, abused in every kind of way, only for the benefit of development with no consideration to conservation. In 1567, Philip of Spain proposed to cross Florida canals to protect his shipping from the treacherous reefs of South Florida and the Florida Keys. John Calhoun, Secretary of War, in 1818 proposed to cross Florida Canal. The first state legislature declared the Everglades totally valueless and petitioned Congress to send an engineer to Florida to develop a reclamation plan. Early legislatures and governors spent their total time on two issues: building railroads and draining Florida. In the 1880s and 90s, in some cases, Florida gave half the land that drainage companies could drain just for their drainage. In those same years, Florida gave railroad companies 9 million acres of state property, and they gave drainage companies 2.5 million acres of state property. Throughout much of the 20th century, it was the Wild West in Florida, no holds barred, dredge, drain, fill, wetlands destruction, unmitigated, with very little consideration to Florida's environment. In the late 1960s, projects like the Cross Florida Barge Canal, Everglades drainage, and a jet port in South Florida highlighted to the people the problems that we're facing. And the people in the late 1960s and early 70s, they began to be very concerned. They got totally fed up with the destruction and pillage of Florida's environment. They went to the governor, and they went to the legislature, and they went to the press. And they spoke very loud and very seriously. And the governor and legislature listened, and they acted. 1972 was considered the year of the environment. That year, the Environmental Land and Water Management Act passed. That created a growth management program in Florida. The Water Resources Act enabled the creation of 5 water management districts and established policy for the protection and management of water. The Land Conservation Act enabled bonding for the acquisition of environmental property. The State Comprehensive Planning Act, and also the Federal Clean Water Act passed that same year. Florida became known at that time as having the best growth management, water management, and environmental land acquisition programs in the nation, unqualified. Interestingly, during the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, while these famous programs were in their heyday, Florida's population rate grew faster than it ever had before or ever has since. Think about that. Now flash forward, 2010, EPA put out an undisputed report. That report found that all waters assessed in Florida, that 80% of the rivers and streams were impaired. That's polluted. 90% of the lakes, ponds, and reservoirs were impaired. 97% of the bays and estuaries impaired. If 1972 was considered the year of the environment, what should we consider the year 2011, when growth management was decimated? Water management districts' budgets were drastically cut. $700 million cut from water management district budgets that year, and over 590 positions were eliminated. Land acquisition was zeroed out that year. So now Florida is crippled with crippled water management districts, a trivial land acquisition program, and a next to nothing growth management program. That's what brings us here today. It's the need to restore and enhance the funding for land and water conservation. We need to conserve more land because we learned a long time ago that the only true way to protect the natural values of the land is to own it or own its development rights. And we learned a long time ago that regulations and incentives, they can't do it. They never have done it. They probably never will do it. That's why we need to purchase much of it.
Yes. Buy the land.
As I said before, the people that will decide the fate of Amendment 1 reside in these buildings behind me, and they reside in your districts. They live among you. You need to go talk to them, and you need to tell them what your feelings are. Let me ask you 3 questions. Question 1. When you and 4 million other Floridians voted for Amendment 1, did you ever think that these funds might be used to replace other existing funds?
No.
When you voted for Amendment 1, did you have any idea that much or most of these funds might go to major infrastructure projects like wastewater treatment plants and sewer lines and water lines?
No.
There are state programs that exist now, federal and state programs that are to fund these programs. And let me mention to you, the 20-year analysis of the needs for wastewater and water projects exceed $35 billion. $35 billion in needs. That might be the subject of another rally that we might want to have sometime in the future. In terms of land acquisition, there are 119 projects on the state's priority land acquisition list, and those projects are estimated to cost $6.7 billion. We need Amendment 1 to go to what it was intended for, and that's for the conservation, preservation, enhancement of land and water.
Yes.
The last question that I want to ask you, when you voted and 4 million other people voted for Amendment 1, was it your intent that these funds be used to restore and enhance funding for environmental programs such as land acquisition and water protection?
Yes.
I'm talking about in addition to existing funds. Now, if you answered questions 1 and 2, no, and question 3, yes, you all passed. This is your time to speak up for Florida's water and land. They did it in 1972. Why not 2015? Go and speak to the legislators.